Hey, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another live stream, 10 Scale Adventures here at the bench. And today we're going to be fooling around with setting up electronics on a DX5C, which is going to be the same as your DX5 Rugged and similar to a lot of other Spectrum radios. And the process is pretty much the same for all radios, minus a few differences in how you do some of the steps. So before we get too dived in on that, something else I wanted to point out, and I think everyone's going to be excited for when I reveal it. I'm already excited for it, but as you can see right up here, there's a box on the shelf. There's not a truck here, there's a box. That is the body for the 1K giveaway build truck. Yep, that's right. I got the body for it. Don't think it's going to come out of the box tonight on this show. We'll see. Maybe if there's enough begging in the comments, I might give a sneak peek at what's in that box, but probably not. We're probably going to save that for a different video because there's a good bit of assembly that needs to happen with that body from the sneak peek that I did in the box. But I'm really excited for it. That's going to be a huge addition to that truck, and I'm going to hate giving it away, but it is. It's going to be given away when the channel hits 1,000 subscribers. So be sure if you want a chance to get your hands on that you share the videos and get word out there that we're growing the channel and we're going to be giving it away when we get to that point. Facebook page is already crested the 600 followers mark. The YouTube channel is at 350-ish, something like that, maybe almost 360. But anyway, so yeah, that's something that's really excited for. The body for the giveaway truck is right up here in that box. So that'll be fun. What we have here on the bench today is a TF2 chassis that already has some of the electronics in it. And we're going to be adding a receiver to this truck. That's a necessity. It's got a Hobbywing 1080 ESC in it that is just a great low budget brush motor ESC. These guys work great. They're reliable. And they're friendly on the wallet if you're looking for an entry-level setup. And again, most of what I'm going to do on this truck is geared towards the entry-level upgrade from an RTR. So the DX5 radios are a really common radio to use as an upgrade from an RTR radio, which is why I'm using that radio to do this setup and not my DX6R that I typically use. And then we've got just this has an RC four-wheel drive 35 turn brushed motor in it. Nothing special. It is a rebuildable motor, but it's just a generic brushed motor. Bang for the buck on what this motor is, I probably suggest a Holmes Hobbies motor over this one, but this is one I had around, so it got put in this truck. And then this has got an Amazon special servo, which gets the job done for the price that it is, but it could definitely use an upgrade. But if you have an RTR, this servo is an upgrade over an RTR servo. So this is a very low buck electronics upgrade, and setting it up and how to set that up for a lot of the newer people that are getting into RC and looking to take their RTR to the next level. I am going to show the process for setting this up using an AVC receiver. So you can see right here on this says AVC. The AVC receivers right there at the bottom. There's an extra step with setting up AVC receivers versus non-AVC receivers for Spectrum, which is like this one. You can see it doesn't, the SR415 doesn't say AVC on it. This is probably what will be in this truck in the long run. It's also a 4-channel. Both of these are. But for those that have an AVC receiver, knowing how to set that up to get rid of the AVC, because in a trail truck or a crawler, you don't want AVC. So we're going to cover that extra step, and we're going to set it up with this guy. And then we're also going to set up the winch on this truck, and we're going to do it using a Hobbywing 1060 waterproof speed controller. This is a $20 brush motor speed controller. There is absolutely nothing special about it other than they are super simple, cost efficient, and they work great for powering your scale winch. So I'll show you how to set that up. It's a really simple way, and it's quite a bit cheaper than using one of the the winch controller units that RC four-wheel drive offers. There are a couple of winch controller units out there now that are smaller that are really nice. Three Brothers has one. And there's another one out there that off the top of my head, I can't think of what it is, but there's another one. I'm not sure what the pricing on those is. I think it's a little bit more than a 1060. They can be hard to get a hold of too, as far as them being in stock. But these Hobbywing 1060s they're about 20 bucks off of Amazon. There's a link to that in the description if you want to check it out. So I'll show you how to use that as a winch controller and how to connect it all up with the rest of your truck so that you can run it all off of a single battery. Then the last piece that we'll cover on the truck side of it is the program box for the Hobbywing 1080. So the 1060 is a non-programmable ESC, but the 1080 is a programmable ESC. And if you're going to use it in a trail truck, you'll want to spend a few extra bucks and get yourself the program box, because there's some settings in there that you're definitely going to want to adjust, not only for it to work well in a crawler, but also to your preference. Things like how aggressive is the drag brake, or do you have 100% reverse throttle or 75% reverse throttle? Similar things like that, which the more experience you get working with these trucks, Neil said the Power Shift RC. That's the other one that I couldn't remember. That makes a nice little speed controller. And it works great with the RC four-wheel drive winches or any of the brushed motor winches. If you look on Amazon or eBay and you see the little brushed motor scale winches that look, identical to the RC four-wheel drive winches, they are basically identical. They're all coming out of China. They're probably all made in the same place. They just have different stickers. That's, the harsh reality of it. So you don't necessarily have to spend, if you want it to say Warren, you're going to have to go to RC four-wheel drive because they've got the licensing to put Warren on there. A lot of the other ones, it looks like it should say it, but it doesn't actually say it for licensing reasons. So, and then we're going to set all that up on my DX5C. This one's been around quite a while. This is before they started adding that smart logo onto the transmitter. As far as how you set it up and program it on here, that's going to be, as far as I know, is going to be exactly the same on this version as it is a brand new one that you buy today and take out of the box tomorrow. How you set this up is still going to be exactly the same. As far as the receivers go, they do have some new trick receivers now from Spectrum and a few of the other brands that you no longer have to use a bind plug for. They have a bind button. I don't have one of those receivers, so I can't show you doing that. However, I imagine the process of using the bind button is very similar. If you reference the manual for the receiver, or it should tell you exactly what that process is. And we'll talk a little bit more about the binding process when we get to that step of it. So the first thing that I did notice, however, is that I made a typical not paying attention boo-boo on my setup job here. So if I switch it over to this camera, move that over, the JST plug that I put on my winch is a male, or is it technically it's we'll just say that's the male, which it should have a female that goes over the top of it. And I put the same plug on the speed controller. So these two don't exactly work right. Whoopsie. So for the sake of setting stuff up, and because I already know that I have some more wire management that I'm going to be doing on this, shortening things like this battery cable is much too long for the battery that's going to sit right here. And I'm going to end up splicing cables together down the road so that one battery goes into two ESCs. But to solve that winch problem, so I can show you, I'm going to end up using jumper cables. This camera is too low. There we go. I'm going to end up using some jumper wires that have pins on both sides so that I can connect those. Again, this is just for setup purposes. This won't stay permanently, but it'll work perfect for doing the setup on this truck. The other thing that I'm going to do that's a little bit wonky, and it's solely for setup purposes, is I've made this homemade, really janky, and forgot to use shrink wrap, so it's all wrapped up with a whole bunch of electrical tape so that it'll be semi-safe, is a 2-into-1 splitter for the battery. So my battery will plug in here, and the 2 ESCs will connect to either one of these so that I can use one battery to power the whole system during setup. And once I get it all done in the setup process, I'll be able to take and do all my final layout on the chassis so that I can figure out exactly how much wire length I want, and I'll cut and splice and rewire everything so it's nice and clean and tidy with not a whole bunch of excess, and make sure that all the wires are away from my moving components. And that my body that'll go on here will sit down all nice and tight and clean too. So this is just going to be we'll try and keep it fairly basic for anybody who wants to follow along and looking to do this setup on their truck. Again, this video is geared more towards the first time user who's stepping up from RTR electronics to something better that is budget friendly. And that's what this setup is. Yeah, I mean, like I said, you're looking at 20 in the 1060, 40 for a 1080. So you're at $60 in the 2 ESCs. You can generally find a winch for around $20, give or take. So that's $80. A Holmes Hobby seal can motor, that they're around $15-20 depending on which one you get. So it's about $100 worth of electronics, not including the transmitter and receiver, which that's generally, you can probably find a used DX5C with a receiver probably under $100 if you're lucky, or you can go brand new and get one with a receiver. And I think depending on which exact version you get, it's probably anywhere from like $120 to $150, depending on which DX5 series, whether it's a Rugged or a C, whether it's got one receiver or two receivers with it, or if it's got a fancy receiver versus a more basic receiver. The prices can vary, but it's a fairly inexpensive all-in-all setup to go from RTR stuff to this setup. So obviously the first step that we need to do is get our electronics connected up so that we can power everything on. Before we power it on, I'm going to show, you can't really see it very well, but my motor is already soldered up. You can kind of see the leads there down here on the bottom side of the motor. I have already checked the rotation direction on the motor, so I'm not going to have to change my rotation direction. If you did have to change the rotation direction with a brush motor using a 1080 ESC, you have to take the leads that connect to the motor and switch positions with them to reverse the direction of the motor. If you do bullet connectors in line on your wiring, that's going to make that a really easy thing to do. Since that part of this was already set up with wire lengths that I liked, this doesn't have inline connectors. Otherwise, I would have intentionally reversed it so that we had to correct it on this video. But I don't have inline connections, and I really didn't want to resolder those because they're nice and neatly done and fit where I want them. But yeah, so with a brush motor, if you need to reverse the direction, you do it by switching the two leads to the other side. It's not a color specific thing. They don't have to be black and red or blue and yellow in this case. It's not a positive, negative. It's just rotation direction. So the way they're on, if they're on two posts one way and you switch the two posts, forward on the trigger is going to make the motor go the opposite way. So that's also going to be the case for our winch, which I can show you that when we get to the winch setup, so that you can see the process with the winch and flipping the wires does the same thing on the winch as it does on the 540 motor. So that's going to be super, super cool. The 1060, like I said, unlike the 1080, the 1060 is non-programmable. So the one and only thing that you really have to do with a 1060 to get it ready for this to be used as a winch controller is this little jumper that's on here You want one jumper to use this as a winch controller, and you want to make sure that it's on the battery type that you're going to use. So this little guy has the battery type is the bottom row when we're looking at it this way, which the writing that is super blurry and I don't think you can read it, but there's text right here in this bottom row, these two spots. They tell you the pin position for this jumper for nickel metal hydride versus, well, actually it would be nickel metal hydride and NiCads would share the same post. So if you do have NiCads that you're going to use, it goes in the nickel metal hydride spot. Otherwise, where most of us are at these days is Lipo, and you need to make sure that that jumper's on the Lipo spot, because that's going to make sure that this ESC hits its built-in cutoff. Granted, you should never run into the cutoff on this ESC because your main motor ESC, the 1080, is going to hit cutoff first because the main motor is what's pulling power all the time. The winch is only pulling power when you need it or when you're using the winch. So the odds of hitting cutoff while using the winch is really slim. Possible, but slim. But to make sure it works right, you want to make sure that that jumper is in the right spot. So I'm not going to get super fancy with this layout because nobody wants to see me just sit here and mess with wires for an extended period of time to organize this. So we're going to just kind of lay it out on the chassis in the approximate locations where stuff's going to be, and make sure that everything stays out of the moving components, because we are going to rotate the drivetrain, check the steering, and also test the winch functionally by the time we're done. All right, so my two ESCs are sitting on there. I'm going to use my janky Y cable and going to connect those. Now, one thing you do want to make sure is if you make something like this for doing testing, is that the Y cable, the orientation of the plugs that match your chassis have the polarity matched. So as you can see, my tapered section of the plug, which XT60s are actually marked on the housing. There is a correct and incorrect way to solder up XT60s. But you can see that they are the tapered top section of the housing, which is the negative side, has my black wires that go to my ESCs, or my negatives for my ESCs. They both match. So that means that my ESCs are both connected the same way. And with those both connected, I need to put the receiver in. And my receiver needs to connect to my servo connectors or my JR connectors for each of the stuff, which are currently tucked away in my fuel cell. Get that out of the way. So, and by the time I'm done with my wiring, my receiver will live in this fuel cell, just because it's there. So I might as well make use of the space that's present rather than having it exposed. All right, so the AVC receiver, so you can see that's the one I'm going to put in here. And on the initial setup, we're going to not delete the AVC so that I can show you what it does, so you have a better understanding, or maybe you're struggling with something with your truck and you don't realize that the AVC is what it is. So the servo connectors for this, the way we want to do it is we want channel 1 to be steering, and 2 is throttle, 3 and 4 are auxiliary channels, which our winch I'm going to put on channel 3. A good little ditty to remember when you're doing that, and this is something someone taught me, I don't know, 20 years ago, when I first started playing with our hobby grade RC cars, back in the early 2000s, late 90s, at least 20 years ago. Anyway, it's that the little ditty is 1 to turn, 2 to burn. So if you remember 1 to turn, 2 to burn, you'll always remember where your connectors need to go in your receivers for your ground-based vehicles. aerial stuff is very different. It doesn't apply there, I'm aware. But for your ground-based vehicles that are using a pistol grip style controller, it's 1 to turn, 2 to burn. If there's an oddball out there, which I'm sure there is, there's always an oddball brand out there that does some weird stuff where it's reversed and 1 is throttle and 2 is steering. I've seen it once or twice, but it's pretty uncommon. 1 to turn, 2 to burn is the typical standard for almost all of them. So even if it's not marked, 1 to turn, 2 to burn. In the case of this AVC receiver, actually in the case of both of my Spectrum receivers, you can't, kind of tough to read, but it actually says steering, throttle, aux1 and aux2 on the receivers. It doesn't actually say a channel number. So that's fine. I mean, the channel numbers in this case, when you're getting into your programming stuff, it's 1 is your steering channel, 2 is your throttle, 3 is your aux channel 1, and channel 4 is your aux channel 2. So a lot of receivers will say CH1, CH2, CH3, and so on, but it still applies 1 to turn, 2 to burn. So my steering servo on this is this guy right here, which I have the steering and the 1080 connectors already zip tied in place where I'd like the wires to run. So I did start on some of the wiring cleanup on this already. And that's when I realized that, hey, this would be a good thing to put out there to show other people, especially newer people that are getting into the hobby and want to upgrade. This would be a good thing to teach them. All right. So when it comes to which way your plug goes in, so both of the servo connectors I have right here are orange, red, brown. Oh, you can't really see that, not on the camera. There we go. They're orange on this side, red in the middle, and brown on this side. So in this case, the orange is the signal wire, the red is the power wire, and the brown is the ground wire. That is consistent with, and I don't think I have an extension here that's complete. I have just a power only extension. So you'll see the other standard color combination is red, white, and black, where this would have a white cable here, red in the middle, and black on the outside, signal, power, ground, in the same order as the orange, red, brown, orange, red, brown. And there is a red, white, black right here on the chassis. You can see it, but it is connected to an extension that goes brown or orange, red, brown. So brown is your ground and red is your power. Orange is your signal. White is signal. Red is power. Black is ground. When you're connecting these into your receiver, we'll use see if we can see it on here. Most receivers are marked somewhere on the receiver. This is really hard to get it to where you can see it. You can kind of see the glare, but right here above the post, there's a negative here, a positive in the middle, right there, and a S for signal on that side. That's going to be the alignment that the connectors get lined up with, and the orientation on this one is exactly the same way. Almost always, again, almost always, not always, but almost always, the ground rail where the black or the brown wire goes is going to be along the outside edge of the receiver. So it'll be right along that outside edge. It'll be the outermost pins. It very rarely is going to be the inner pins. And that has to do with how they lay out the little PCB circuit board inside. All the ground connections, if you were to take a resistance meter on there and touch 2 ground connections, any 2 of them, it's going to show 0 resistance or show that they're actually connected. All the ground posts are connected. And since that's how they do it on the board, it just works better for the PCB layout or that circuit board layout to put all the ground posts at the outer edge so that all the different stuff that goes on this little circuit board going in and out and all over the place to tell these different posts with when to put power out or when to put signal out, that all connects into other places on the board, but the grounds just all tie together so that they don't have to go anywhere else on that board that is anywhere near as complicated. That's the short of it as to why they're that way. So probably 99.9% of your receivers, the outermost set of posts, the ones closest to the edge of the case, are going to be your ground post. So if you can't find the marks, that's your safe starting point, is to put your ground to the outside. So now I'm going to put my throttle in on channel 2, or the throttle channel as it's indicated on this receiver. And I'm going to start with just these two. I'm not going to add the winch in yet because I want to get this. Actually, no, we'll add it in right up front. Now, this has the red, white, black. But you can see that I've taken the red wire out. This is the one other really important step to using 2 ESCs in a rig that's going to use one battery. If you don't take this wire out, if you don't take the power wire from the ESC out of the plug, you run the risk of burning up your receiver or causing other intermittent electrical issues, because the power that goes to the receiver to make it work and also gets transmitted out to your servo to make your servo work, unless you're using a direct power servo or an external back, which I'm not setting this up on an external back. That's a next level up type of upgrade. But the BEC power, or the battery eliminator circuit that is inside the ESCs, they aren't happy playing together. And since the 1080 has a stronger internal BEC, it can put out more power to run my servo. I'm going to use the internal BEC from the 1080, which means I need to eliminate the external BEC or the internal BEC in the 1060 from my circuit. This will still work perfectly fine. The 1060 is not going to have any issues working. It's going to the ground is going to tie it in to complete the signal circuit. It's just not going to provide power back through the red wire by having this one eliminated. Removing that wire is really simple. It's just a matter of, there's a little tab here that hooks and holds onto the metal pins that are inside this plug. You just gently lift that little tab with a razor blade or an X-Acto knife. Just lift it just a little bit and you can get that plug, that pin inside there, to just slide right out of the housing. And then you just want to make sure that you safely wrap that pin up so that it doesn't short circuit on anything else in the chassis. A really good way to do that is, one, secure it by itself. Piece of shrink tube works really great for that. And then take it and fold it back on the servo wire and put another piece of shrink tube on there and shrink tube it like that. This will keep it nice and safe in case you ever want to use the 1060 for something else and have that battery eliminator circuit. You don't want to just cut this pin off. It's when you can save it in case you want/need to use this to power something else. So hot tip right there. That's probably the number one most important thing you can do to use a 1060 or any other basic ESC. Because you could take your stock RTR ESC, the AE5, for instance, from an Axial 10.2 RTR. You could take that ESC and use it to power your winch, and then you don't have to buy a winch controller at all. That saves you a little bit of money to do it. It's a little bit big. Even the 1060 is a little big to use as a winch controller, but until you're getting up into some of the more higher dollar stuff, if you're just getting started and you want to add a winch and upgrade your electronics a little bit, reuse that RTR ESC. It's gonna work great, and it'll save you a little bit of money. The ticket is just making sure that you do that BEC eliminated from whatever ESC is going to be powering the winch. So let's get this connected, and then we'll be ready to bind up our radio. All right. So again, you can see that I have on the outermost edge, I have my black and the two browns for the other connectors. And on the inner side, I have the oranges and the white, which is all my signal cables. And the red connection goes right down the middle. That's the power rail. Okay, so those are all connected and ready to be powered up. I don't have the winch actually connected to the ESC yet. Yeah, I think we can go ahead and throw the jumpers in. I don't see an issue with that right now. So my two jumpers are red and white. I'm going to start with having the red jumper connect the red to red on my outputs here, which again, this is completely irrelevant because the brush motor, if I want it to go the other way, I just switch these two connections and it goes the other way. So black versus red doesn't matter for brush motors. They can go either one. You put it in the one that makes the motor go the direction you want it to go. There are brush motors, keep in mind, just a learning moment. There are brushed motors that are direction specific. Generally speaking, they're going to be a lot more expensive. If you're looking at brush motors in that price range where you have to be concerned with that, you probably know what you're looking for and what you're looking at and why. But be aware that they do exist, brush motors that are directional specific. And it's important that you don't run them as their forward direction opposite of what they're intended for, because it'll ruin them and the performance will be terrible. What makes them direction specific has to do with the way magnets are set up and the way the timing is set up in the motor, so that it provides the optimum amount of power and smoothness for the forward direction, and it may sacrifice a lot for the reverse direction to achieve that forward power and smooth operation. So again, those motors they're generally quite expensive, and if you're looking at your first upgrade level, anything that's in that price range that you're really looking at, unless you're going from an RTR to a full-blown comp rig before you know how to do this, which I don't recommend. I recommend learning a little bit, not necessarily spending a whole bunch of money on mid-grade stuff, but make sure you know what you're doing before you jump in on buying some of that high dollar stuff. Otherwise, you'll just be really disappointed if you accidentally get something and didn't realize it wasn't for your application. So now everything is connected and it looks like a wiry mess. And some of you have trail trucks that look like this kind of wiry mess that you take out on the trail and actually run. Take a few minutes and clean up the wiring. Make sure everything's tucked away. Do some soldering, shorten some wiring, get rid of excess. Zip tie, few little zip ties, do some cable management. It will make your stuff, not only will it make it look cleaner, but when it looks really good and clean and is nice and tidy, it generally works better and lives longer. So it is worth putting the extra time in once you get it sorted out to do a little bit of cable management. It's just all around good practice. All right, so I've got my radio, which hopefully has batteries that are good. Yep, batteries that are good. Look at that. Okay, well, there it is, 6.1 volts. I do have AA's in this radio right now. There is another video that I did on my channel a while back about doing a Lipo conversion on one of these radios. I don't use this one very often and it gets loaned out now, so I had switched it back to AA's for convenience of people that it gets loaned to, so that they don't have to worry about dealing with a Lipo or being able to charge a Lipo or anything like that. But if you're interested on a Lipo conversion for your DX5 series radios, you can check that video out somewhere on the channel. After the stream, I will add a link to that in the description So if you want to be able to just go skip right to that, it seems to be a fairly fairly interesting video that gets a lot of attention. So I know a lot of people are interested in doing that. It is a great thing to do if the DX5C is your regular radio. They consume AA batteries a lot. So doing a Lipo swap or a life swap, any of those rechargeable battery swaps, basically, doing it on a DX5C is surprisingly easy. So I do recommend checking out that video if you've got a DX5C and you're tired of throwing away AA's. All right, radio is on. Let me set it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on a new model that hasn't been created yet. That way we know that it's not something that was already set up. This is going to be hard for me to show and do. Maybe I can do it watching on the screen. So model, select, add new. You want to create a new model. Create. There we go. We have a brand new model. Back button. Yep. And nothing is set up or bound to this rig, to that radio now, at least on that model. Now we're going to bind our AVC receiver. So we take a bind plug and we put it into the bind port. On the AVC receiver, it says bind/battery. What that means where it says bind/battery is if you were using this in a nitro application, that's where you would connect your auxiliary battery to power the receiver, because obviously the nitro engine doesn't generate the electricity to power the electronics. You still have to connect a battery to the receiver. That's the plug you would want to put it in, is the one that's labeled battery. It would work on another plug, but just use the one that it's meant for. That way, you know you're good. Now we can power up and by all means have no magic smoke. The battery of choice today for this setup is a Tattoo 1050 3S battery. I really like these little batteries for my applications just because they take up very little space, have good power, and they're really easy to work with in the really scale trucks. Another great choice with a little bit bigger capacity is a 2200 drone packs. I think those are the ideal size pack for a truck you want to use out on the trail, for size and convenience. But these little 1050s, I get a solid 45 minutes out of them. So that's not too bad, and just easily carry one around in your pocket. All the electronics that are in this are 3S friendly. So if you are looking to go from something that's 2S only to having the 3S option, these are all 3S friendly options. Obviously, since I just connected and we got no blue smoke. You may have noticed that the 1060 was in the on position when I connected the battery. Shame on me. Should have made sure it was off. So we're going to take our radio. Let's see if I can do this right here. So on our radio, we're going to click the wheel. If you've got a DX5 Rugged, you've got a little bit different interface right here. It's the touch deal instead of the wheel. And we're going to scroll down to where it says bind, which I cannot read on that screen, so I got to look at it here. Bind/frame. There we go. So I don't know if you can read it on there, but it says bind/frame. And then I'm going to click the wheel to go into that menu. And from there, you don't have to change any of this stuff up here. The frame that this is currently on, the 11 millisecond frame. To be honest, I don't think I've ever run into a scenario where I've had to change that. It does exist, I'm sure. Maybe in some of the race stuff or whatnot that comes into play. But for any of your trail truck stuff, you can usually just leave that alone. And then you go down to where it says bind. Before I do that, I'm going to turn on my 1080. And now that the 1080 is on, I have a flashing orange light in my receiver. That indicates the receiver's in bind mode. And then I'm going to click my wheel and it says binding. Now we wait and we wait. So the flashing orange light went away. Still say binding? Yeah, still says binding. All right, binding failed. That's super annoying. However, not uncommon with the DX5C. So what we're going to do is we're going to power cycle the ESC in order to power cycle the receiver. To get out of this screen here, I'm going to click the wheel and it takes me back out, and I have to go back into bind frame, and then I have to scroll back down to bind down at the bottom. And now I'm going to do this. I'm going to take my controller, I'm going to hold it way out here away from my rig, turn the power on, and now I got a flashy light, and I'm going to click the bind wheel. See how we got those flashes? Now when I bring this back, watch, it's going to show that a new model, and you may have heard the beep. How super annoying is that? Oh, I have nothing. Maybe I have to power cycle it and take the bind plug out. Let's find out. All right, bind plug is now out. And we have, oh, how horribly annoying. Did I do that? Did I really do that? Oh, I did. That's super annoying. So check it out. I'm a doofus and I didn't plug my stuff in the right place. I didn't look close enough when I connected my servo connectors to my receiver, and my throttle is on the steering channel and my steering is on the aux channel. They're out of order. Well, so that means that's an easy fix though. The receiver is now connected to the controller, so that's a really easy fix. We turn it off and we disconnect the plugs and reconnect them in the right spots. Yeah. If it went smooth, that would defeat the purpose, right? All right. Yep, I was off by one whole row because I didn't look close enough and skipped one. All right. Those ones are in, and then we connect the winch controller into aux3. All right, there we go. Those are now all down on the rows where they're supposed to be. So now when we power this back up and I turn the wheel, I have steering. And if I give it throttle, which we're going to try and do just a little bit because the wheels are down. Yep, there we go. It moves. Oh, so this really needs a little bit of expo. Super jerky right now. So we'll get into how to smooth that out a little bit as well. But the one thing now is AVC is enabled. See if I can get it to. Maybe it didn't. That doesn't look like I can get it to show the AVC. That's interesting. Let's check in the controller. So there's a menu in the controller called AVC. Yeah, that's why. So this is one of those things I'm going to have to play with. I haven't used an AVC specific receiver in a trail truck because I know it creates issues. But right now, the AVC in the controller is inhibited. But I think what part of the issue is when the AVC is enabled on the receiver, it creates issues in the aux channels functioning appropriately. So we're going to see if I can get aux3 to run the winch before doing a proper AVC disable on the receiver side. But since my controller has the AVC inhibited, it's telling the receiver not to do it. But if we switch that, so I can show you what AVC does, in there. And we go from inhibit to on. Now you see a whole bunch more menus came up there. Those menus all have to do with how the AVC reacts. Now, if I take the truck and I move it, maybe. Interesting. Maybe it's because of the orientation the receiver's in. So the AVC basically acts kind of like a gyro type system. Not the kind of gyro that's used in a drift car. And it does not work for drifting. Take it from somebody who did try and mess with that a little bit when I was playing around with some stuff I had before I built a real drift car. Yes, I like drift cars. They are a lot of fun. I do miss drifting with my buddies back in Oregon. I think there's a group of them out drifting tonight that I'm sure are having a great time, and I'm jealous. All right, so the AVC is now, or the receiver's now got a little piece of tape on the back of it to secure it, which it would if it was installed on anything. You want your receiver secured. And that should, apparently I can't get AVC to actually do anything. That's how little I know about AVC, I guess. So the steering's working. What if I, weird. And I know so many people who fought with AVC issues, and when I try and create them, I can't. Well, I guess that just blows the whole theory about dealing with AVC completely out of the water. It's obviously not an issue. I don't know. I can't tell you. So let's find out if I can make the winch work without doing an AVC disable on the receiver. So we'll make that to where we can see that. So to make the winch work, I obviously have to turn that ESC on. So it turned on. And now I got to go into the controller, which will press the back button. I just exited the AVC menu. Actually, we'll go back in so you can see. AVC menu, AVC is on, which I don't recommend this, but we're gonna experiment here. Now I'm gonna go down to, oh, it's been a while since I used this. Want to, which menu is it? Aux menu, that's the one. I want the aux menu. So we go to aux assign. And aux3 is currently turned off. Oh, back in there. Click down on the wheel, click on inhibit, and I don't want it to be steering. So I'm going to spin the wheel. Momentary active on R. I don't want that. It's not going to be the button I want it. I'm looking for it to be a momentary on F. So I don't want that. Oh, there's G, L, F. Okay, so F is a 3-position switch. And if you're not, the switches on the DX5C are labeled on the body of the radio. So that's the G button. It's just a button. The F is this one right here, and it's a 3-position. It clicks forward and backwards. Then you have E right up here, which is forward and backwards. And then you have trim type switches across the top of the wheel. That's what I recommend using these for. If you use another aux or a four-wheel steer or something, or you prefer to use these, they're programmable. And then you have the buttons that are here on this side of the radio, which one's the back button and one is a clear button, which I don't ever really use. So we're going to set this on E, but I want it to be momentary, not linear. Oh, so once you have it on E, you click the wheel, and then you can see it's on 3 position, and momentary is active. And so cyclic, what cyclic means is that if I click it forward, it goes to the first, it goes forward 1 position. If I click it forward again, rather than clicking back, if I click forward again, it would loop to the first position. So it has 3 spots, cyclic, and normally the button neutral is here. If I click it forward, it goes here, and cyclic would mean that it would go from here to here. So you don't want, for a winch, you don't want cyclic. You want momentary, which means it'll only be on when you hold the button. And you want it to be momentary, non-cyclic, so that when you push the button, it goes here. And when you let go of the button, it goes back to neutral. When you push the button the other way, it goes here. And when you let go of the button, it goes back to neutral. So those are the settings that you want for the winch. You want 3 position aux, the aux channel you're going to put it on, which I wanted F, not E, right? Yeah, I want F for this. E is the same type of button, so E and F both work. You want cyclic inhibited. You want 3 position. Switch that to F. There we go. So there we go. 3 position, inhibit, momentary, active. These are the settings that you want for a winch. Doesn't matter what winch controller you use. Those are the settings you want. You don't want your winch running when you're not pushing a button. It'll lead to disaster. Take it from somebody who knows. All right. So now that those are there, and do this so you can see it, which is challenging. We'll go scroll up to the back menu, and I'm going to turn the truck off for a minute. And we're going to go to the main menu. Scroll all the way up, or you can press the back button, main menu. And then I'm going to switch to the monitor, which should be, nope, there we go. So if you're on the main menu and you scroll the wheel down one time, you get the monitor screen. Now at the monitor screen, you can turn the wheel. Oh, okay. So the truck wasn't showing AVC stuff, but you can see that aux1, when I turn the wheel, does some really weird stuff, right? That's AVC. AVC is doing something really weird, which means that my aux1 channel, if I actually try and use that with my winch right now, it's going to do something really weird, potentially break my winch, break the winch line. So we're going to disable AVC in the radio, and that'll get rid of that. And we'll probably have to get rid of it on the receiver too. So again, we'll go back to the main menu, and then from there we will scroll down to AVC. And we're going to go to here from on to inhibit. Now all the menus went away. Return. And then main menu. And then that took us back to the monitor. If I hit the scroll up, there's the standard menu. So scroll wheel down 1 click, and I'm in the monitor. Now if I turn the wheel, you can see that aux1 is no longer doing anything weird. Just the steering moves with the wheel. That's what we want to see, right? And then if I pull the trigger, you can see the throttle and go to reverse. I got 100% in both. It looks like I only have 90. There's 100%. And then if I click my F switch this way, aux3. What? So when I set this up, what I thought was aux1 because AVC was on, AVC took up aux1 and 2 channels and only gave me an aux3 option, and I didn't even notice it. So what I set up that I wanted to use my winch is now on channel 5. So that wouldn't even work for my winch at all because AVC was in there. So we need to reset the winch channel. And we go to do that, we go back in the menu. We go to aux assign. The aux1 now says inhibit. But if we switch from aux1 to aux3, there's what we just set up for our winch. But before it said aux1 because of the AVC was on. So we're going to change this to from aux3 to inhibit. Oh, come on. What are we doing here? Scroll down. There we go. The input needs to be inhibit so that we can reassign it. Where are you? Inhibit. There it is. So inhibit means it's just turned off. It's non-functioning. All right. And then we go up to where it says aux3 now. Go to aux1. Change aux1 to the input switch that we want, which is F. And it's in 3 position. Cyclic is turned off and momentary is active. That's what we want. Go back menu, go in and look one more time. Yep, there it is, still good. Back again and scroll down. And now if I press my F switch, which is this little guy right here, forward or backwards, my F switch should move aux1. There it is. And that's where my winch controller is plugged in on the receiver. So we are now ready to function test on the chassis. We'll turn it this way so you can see the winch line. And hopefully I have this set going the right way because otherwise it'll be really tight. One thing I can do to reduce that is you can reduce the travel mode. But I'm not going to do. I'm going to take a risk. The winch line that's on this is kind of stretchy, so it should be all right. All right, both ESCs armed properly. I'm going to show you we still have steering. We still have throttle. Shake my whole table. A rather torquey motor. All right, and then winch, if we're lucky, when I click this switch away from me, so we'll click the little switch and nope, it goes the opposite way that I want it to. So what that did is I pushed I like the switch when I push it forward, I want winch out. It makes sense to me logically to when I push the switch that way, my winch goes out. When I pull the switch towards me, my winch goes in. That's what works for me. But you can set it to go either way. In which case, if I want this to go the other way, all I have to do is take these 2 wires, and swap their positions. So no changes in the electronics at all, just swap those 2 positions, which I could reverse the input on the controller too. You can reverse what the switch does, make it go the other way. But since we're still in setup mode, we can just switch those. Now, when I click this switch here, there we go. Goes out. And pull the switch the other way. And it goes back in. It's that easy. Goes out, winch in. And it's a pretty, using the 1060 with these scale winches, the amount of power that you can get out of it, because you're powering the winch with 3S level power now doing it this way, and the winch doesn't care. It works great, and it produces more power than it would have if it was hooked up to like an RC four-wheel drive winch controller. This has a drag braking. I'm pulling on it pretty good. You can see the strain in my knuckle right over here. I'm giving a pretty good drag on it. And I mean, my winch isn't free spooling. And then if I pull my winch in, I can flat drag the whole truck. So, and you can see that it finally broke the motor loose on the motor, on the truck's motor's drag brake. It finally, the drag brake allowed it to release just a little bit. So the amount of power you get out of this setup for what it is really good. Is it high-end comp level stuff? No, it's not high-end comp level stuff, but for what it is and the budget that it's at, it's really good. So the only other thing that we want to do is, because I know that at some point, if I were to leave it this way, the AVC is going to mess with it. You already saw that it messed with the controller on what aux channels were doing stuff. So I want to make sure that it's disabled in my receiver as well. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and turn everything off. And then we're going to rebind the receiver. So the receiver has, this receiver has 2 rows on it that you actually have to use for the binding process to disable AVC. So you have a bind/battery, which is what we used last time. So we put a plug in right there, a bind plug in. And then the next row down, I know you probably can't read it, but it says disable. That is the port that disables the AVC in the receiver side. So we're going to put 2 bind plugs. Yep, 2 bind plugs. There's 1, there's 2. We have 2 bind plugs in this receiver now to disable the AVC. And then the process is the same. So we'll go back into our radio and we'll go to the bind menu, which you probably can't read that because I can't read it on my screen. So I'm just going to scroll down. I mean, you know where the bind menu is now. And I go to bind, scroll right back down to bind, you know, the same as it would have been if I hadn't done a bind at all before. And then I'm going to turn the truck back on. We should see the flashy orange light in the receiver. No, you can't see it because of the way the camera's angled. There's the flashy orange light. And then I'm going to put this way over here again. Click bind. You can see the lights changed. And, oh, probably going to fail because I moved it too soon. This is one of the weird things with the DX5C. I don't have this problem with the DX4C that my wife uses or my DX6R. I don't have to do this. I only have to do this with my DX5. So it says bind failed. We'll get out of that, go back to bind, power cycle the ESC to restart the receiver. Okay, receiver's there again. We click the button for bind. Oh, I didn't scroll down. Oh, dang it. I left the menu. Wrong button. All right, and bind. And there it went. It picked up the receiver with a, yep, and it just reset. So that's just wonky. I mean, if you put it next to the receiver, it fails probably 75% of the time. You put it about 6 feet away, you get about a 50% failure rate. But if it does fail, just do it again. Move a little bit further away. It's just something wonky about them. So now my receiver's happy. We turn it off, remove the bind plugs, both of them, and we can stick it back where it'll live and turn it back on. And we have, there's our steering, throttle. Actually, with the AVC removed, the throttle is nowhere near as jerky. So I think the AVC was definitely doing weird stuff. So you want to disable the AVC. I mean, you can see just how much smoother I can make it move. And I haven't done any expo or anything in the remote. Before it was really jerky, and now it's super smooth. That's pretty impressive. That was just getting rid of AVC. So I'm happy. AVC, even though I couldn't get it to do the steering thing I've seen and heard people fight with, we did see some of the other issues that AVC creates. And we got rid of those. And it's the first time I've actually messed with it in a trail truck. I mean, I've had this receiver in a Go Fast rig, which having AVC in a Go Fast rig, it's kind of a nice feature for a basher rig. For ripping about, it makes them a little bit more stable. So what else can we do here? We can run the winch again, make sure we didn't lose that channel. So right here, where's the button? There it is. Winch out. Oh, downside of two ESCs is you have two power switches. What you can do on the 1060 though, if you want to not have two power switches and you want to just have the battery plug be your power switch, is you can cut this plug off or just leave it in the on position and unplug your battery to take the power away from it. I leave the plug on there because I never know, or the switch on there and enabled, because I never know what I might use this ESC for in the future. But if you are going to use that setup in a comp type scenario, be sure to turn your winch ESC on before the comp starts. That way, or before your comp run starts, just double check that, because the last thing you want to do is be in the middle of a comp run, go to use your winch and realize, oh, I didn't turn on the ESC. Been there, done that. And it costs you a touch in your comp, which, depending on the comp, can be a really high penalty. But now that that's on, winch out and winch in. Yep. And the drag brake's working much better now too. Much smoother. Yeah, I mean, it's super. Once you understand this process of how to set these rigs up and how to use the controllers and how they work and what the basic fundamentals of the process are, it becomes really easy to set up a lot of controllers. I mean, some of them are a little bit more complicated than others. The process for setting up a new truck on my DX6R is way more complicated. There's so much more information you have to put in. You even have to tell the radio which receiver you're actually using. But there's reasons for that. This radio has a whole lot more channel by channel tuning features where everything is programmable to function the way you want it to function. But that comes at a premium. And if it wasn't for being able to acquire that at a deal secondhand, on a secondhand deal, I wouldn't have it, because it's overkill for your trail truck. A DX5C is a great radio for a trail truck. It has enough channels to do pretty much everything you'd want to do. If you've got a TRX6, or not a TRX6, I guess TRX6, or a TRX4 that's got the 2-speed and has the diff lockers front and rear, and it has, let's see, it has steering, which is going to be one channel, and then it's got throttle, which is channel 2, and then you've got lockers, so that would take you up to 4 channels, and 2-speed would take you to 5 channels. So you could run a TRX4 complete with one of these radios, and you'd be 1 channel short of being able to add a winch, unless you paired something else or did a locker delete. That's the only application crawler I can think of that has that you would be channel limited with a DX5 series radio. So there's ways around that. The easiest one is to just do a locker delete and take the front locker out, because realistically you always want the front wheels locked unless you're only using it as just a trail cruising rig. And if you're just using it as a trail cruising rig, the odds are the stock controller works perfectly fine for you. But yeah, so our winch works, our motor works, our ESCs work. Well, let's take a quick look at programming on the 1080. So the 1080 uses a program card, which you can't see because I've got the wrong camera up. There we go. 1080 uses a program card like this. I think there is another program card that's similar or a little bit different, or digital. I think it's a digital well, this is technically digital, but it's a little bit fancier of a program card that you can use. But this one works perfectly great for the 1080. And then, but if I don't pull up the document, I won't know what the channels are. So if you go online, and I can add a link in the description for this, for the document. There's a link for the program card already. Man, I got to make it so I can see what I'm doing here on the screen. Shrink that down. There we go. I can see it now. So but I can add a link for the manual for this, because this does have a couple of tables on it which tell you what the different categories are and what they do and what the different settings for each category, but it does not have a 1080 label. I think when these are new, they come in a box with another set of stickers that you could put on there, because these stickers, when I got mine, these were the labels that were on it, but I think it came with another set of labels, but I really don't remember. I probably threw them away because I just went straight to the internet and pulled the chart for this ESC. So on the ESC itself, there's 3 pins, an open servo looking connection point right here on the ESC. That's where the program box connects. And the ESC has to be, you can probably plug it in with the ESC on and not have any issues, but I always turn it off. Side note, because I just thought of it. This cable that comes with the program box, make sure it stays with the program box. Otherwise, you'll have to make one or find one. This is not a standard servo extension. This is a female-female extension or cable. So you don't want to lose that one. I mean, it's not hard to make another one or find one, but if you misplace it, the odds of having another one in your kit that works for this is pretty slim. Which could be kind of a bummer if you're in a hurry. So that servo connection or JR style connection on the ESC is where your program box plugs into. It is labeled with a minus, a plus, and a squiggly line. The squiggly is your signal line. So obviously black is the ground, red is the plus, and the squiggly is the white wire. So that's your orientation. And it matches the markings that are right here on the top of this, which you can kind of see that there's some etching markings right there, but they're hard to read. So when I turn this on, you can see my program box starts lighting up and it gives me numbers. So you have the item number on this side and the value for the item number on the other side. Now you take that information and you go across to the chart or the table information for a 1080 ESC. So the item category number 1 is the running mode. For a trail truck, the running mode that you want is forward reverse. That means that when you use the trigger, when you pull it, it just goes forward. When you push it the other way, it gives you reverse right away. The other option that you have you have 2 other options and that you can choose in the value category. Option 1 is forward and brake only, which is typical for most race applications. You're not allowed to have a reverse because it can cause serious crashes and a lot of upset people on a racetrack. So for racing, you have no reverse. That's what option 1's for. Option 2 is forward, brake, and reverse. What that means is when you give it forward throttle, when you squeeze the trigger, which you can't see me doing, I'm moving my finger and it's not even on the screen. So when you give it throttle and it goes forwards, but when you go from forwards to the reverse position, it applies a brake. It doesn't actually go into reverse until you go back to neutral and then go into reverse again. Then it'll go into reverse. Not ideal for trail trucks or crawlers. You usually want to have an instant reverse, not a forward brake reverse setting, which is why I have this one on option 3. The next thing you can do here is you press the item button, which is labeled on this side. And now you can see my item number changed to item 2. Item 2 is the battery type. So just like on our 1060 that used a jumper to tell the ESC that we were using a LiPo battery, we need to tell the 1080 what type of battery we're using, either LiPo or nickel metal hydride, or if you're using, NiCad, which is, there are people who still have them. But if you're using a NiCad, you use the nickel metal hydride setting. So we want to make sure that it's on LiPo, which it is on LiPo. And then we hit the item key again, and it goes to item number 3. And item 3 is the cutoff voltage. That's going to be the voltage that our battery, which is hanging around over here, that's the cutoff voltage for our battery. Stop falling over. It has 4 settings: disabled, low, medium, and high. The low, medium, and high are settings for if you're running a LiPo. Disabled, you can use if you're using a nickel metal hydride or even a NiCad, because those batteries, especially nickel metal hydrides, it's really important to fully cycle the battery from full charge to fully discharge. By doing that, and same with NiCad, if for anybody still has them and still using them, because I know people do, you want to make sure that you fully charge them and fully discharge them each time you use them. So that's why you use the disabled. Those you can run until the truck turns off, because the battery is so low, and then you charge them back up. LiPo batteries, you don't want to do that. Never fully deplete a LiPo battery. It'll ruin them. So that's what the settings are for the cutoff voltage. I recently did a basic test on this. Shut up, radio. That's one of the annoying things about a DX5 series radio, is it beeps at you if you leave it on and walk away, which I didn't walk away, but it knew that I hadn't touched it. But the setting I would recommend for a LiPo battery on a 1080 is the medium. That cuts the battery off right around 3.5 volts, 3.4 to 3.5, which is a good safe voltage to cut your LiPos off and not do any harm to them. Running them all the way down to 3 volts or 3.2 even, you start to get to the lower end of what's a good cycling, and you can reduce the number of charges that you can get out of a battery in its lifetime. But that's really up to you. My recommendation is the medium setting for the cutoff voltage. It's a good safe place to set your truck. So the next you have the item 4. Item 4 is the initial, they call it initial start force. And that's when you pull the trigger and you hit the point where the ESC enables the motor. It won't work because the program box is connected. I got really confused there for a second. But when the trigger hits the point that the motor would be enabled as you start to pull it, that's the amount of power that it comes right out of the gate with. And that's basically your startup power. That's a kind of a back and forth. On a trail truck and a crawler, you want a really nice smooth startup for control. But at the same time, you want enough power to get the motor rotating, especially if you're on a climb. The setting that I went with for this platform was an initial. Okay, read the wrong line for a second. I was like, I did what? So I used a value of 2, which is 2% initial startup force. So when the motor gets a go signal, it goes to 2% power. For this truck, that works really good. For other motor combinations and different trucks, you may need as high as what I think it goes as high as 10%. 12. No, you can have the startup power as high as 16%. So that's one that you'll have to play with the tuning a little bit to figure out what works best for your truck and your driving style. Next category is item 5. Item 5 is the maximum forward force, 100%. No brainer. And that's what this is set for. Option 4, it can be set to 25, 50, 75, and 100. No brainer. You want 100% of your power available. I mean, why would you want less power? I'll tell you why. Say you have a loaner rig, or you're setting your rig up for a a younger child that's starting to learn, this is where you would go in here. This is a great setting that you can go in and just change the power and be like, hey, you know what? It needs to go slow no matter how much they pull the trigger. And you can change this setting and it'll cut the max amount of power output down to a 25, 50, or even 75% power rather than the full 100%. So that's why you would have this setting and why you would set it lower. And the next setting we have on item 6 is the maximum reverse. This one I run it at 75%. It has 25, 50, 75, and 100. I run it at 75% because generally speaking, I don't want to reverse with the same amount of power that I like to have available going forward. And then the other reason that I run it a little bit lower is that giving the reverse signal on a controller is you tend to be a little bit more jumpy. Pushing the trigger out's not as smooth as squeezing it in. So having a little bit less power in case you stab it a little too hard is a good safe thing. So I pull the top end off of it and run it at 75. That's personal preference. That you set that one where you'd like it. Next is item 7 is the maximum brake force. This has a whole bunch of settings ranging from 0 to 100%. I have mine set at 100%. If I want this to hit the brakes, I want it to hit the brakes. That's just the way I like to drive. If you want the maximum brake force to be lower, then you can set it lower. That is not the drag brake though. So keep that in mind. Maximum brake force is not drag brake. That's when if I'm cruising the throttle and I just let off and it slams back to neutral, then that's the amount of force that it can potentially apply at that point. Actually, no, that's not true. The maximum brake force, I don't think that does anything because I don't have the brake function enabled. I have forward reverse only, so I never have a point where I'm hitting the brakes. So for a trail truck, that probably does nothing. I'll have to check with that and see if I set it to 0 instead of 100, if the truck behaves the same, if the drag brake works the same. But I think that does nothing for a trail truck. But if you're using this setup in a 1080 in a short course truck or a basher rig or something like that, which they are more than capable of being a good little ESC for something like that, then you can set, have that forward reverse brake mode set in the ESC, in which case the maximum brake force is going to how much the maximum braking output of the motor will be. Will it do 100% brake or 50%, etc. Next setting is number 8. Number 8 is the initial brake force. It is very important that if you're using the drag brake, and this one took me a while to figure out what was going on with it, and I know other people have run into this issue, but if you're using a drag brake on a trail truck, you want the initial brake force set to 0. The reason you want that set at 0 is if you have an initial brake and you get onto a hill, it'll hit the initial brake for some reason, and then it'll transfer into drag brake. But at that point, it'll go full neutral with no resistance, and your truck will either roll down backwards or roll down forwards when you're expecting drag brake. So if you're using a 1080 in a trail truck like this, set the initial brake force to 0%. Very important. The next one on there is the drag brake. Item 9 is the drag brake. I have mine set at 6, which is a 70% drag brake. Let's see, it goes 0, 5%, 10, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. Those are the options. And it looks like I'm running it at 70%. I like to have a drag brake that isn't a full-on parking brake. I mean, I have one ESC that does do full-on parking brake style setup, which is an Axe. That's a whole different beast. We won't get into that. But for any of my other ESCs that are in any of my trail trucks, I like a drag brake to have some roll to it. I don't want free roll. I want it to just be a drag or a trail brake. For those who might ride motorcycles, you know what that is. So that's why I have it at 70 and not all the way up at 100. It might even be a little bit high for this truck. I need to get it out and do some testing with it and see how it does on inclines, at what angle the drag brake starts rolling and what angle it'll hold at. If you move up to a little bit higher end ESCs, you can actually get an ESC that has on the fly drag brake adjustment so that you can turn it up when you want more and turn it down when you want less. That's a super cool feature, but you have to spend a little bit more money to get into something that has that option. Something like the Mamba Micro has it, the Mamba X has it, and a lot of the upper Castle ESCs have that feature. I'm not sure what other non-Castle ESCs have it, but I do know that it's a super cool feature, and I've got that set up on a couple of my rigs and really like it. But at this price point, you can't find that option, and this is still great as far as a drag brake. And a lot of people don't even end up using it that do have the option to use that. They just learn to drive their trucks with the drag brake where it's set. So moving on, item 10, which we're almost done. There's only a few more. I promise it's only a few. Item 10 is the drag brake rate. For that one, I would probably have even if I read the text straight from the manual as to what the drag brake rate is, that would probably not make sense. But the easiest way I can explain that is how fast the drag brake is applied. That's where if you let go of the throttle from on the throttle to neutral, it's how fast it ramps into drag brake mode and applies the full force of whatever your drag brake setting is. So the higher, I believe, the higher the drag brake rate, the faster the drag brake is applied. The lower the drag brake rate, the slower it is applied. I believe that's the case. I'd have to dig through the manual to be 100% sure on that. But you can find that if you want to find it. I have mine set midway. It doesn't give you time frames that it applies it or anything. It's just level 1 to level 9. You have to pick somewhere. So I went right in the middle at level 5. I figured that was a good safe starting point. Number 11 is the neutral range. That is how big neutral is. I have mine set at 3, which is neutral range of 0.04. Be quiet, radio. 0.04 ms, which I'm assuming is milliseconds. To be completely honest, I don't know how that one really comes into play. I don't know. I'd have to read the manual detailed to find out. We're not in a racing scenario where you really are dialing that up, especially with a radio like the DX5Cs. The response rates and stuff like that between the communication frequency rate and stuff is just not fast enough to really see a big difference there. You can play with it, but I would just throw that right down the middle of the settings and call it good. You'll probably never notice a difference in a trail truck. Next is item 12. 12 is the start mode or the punch. This is how much power it's gonna throw at it when you punch the throttle, I guess. I thought we already figured that was initial. I wonder what the difference is between start mode punch and initial start force, which was setting 4. I don't know. I have mine set on 5, which is right in the middle. And start mode punch, it's just level 1 to level 9. There's no other information there. Again, I could dig through the manual and read up on what it does, but put it right in the middle. I mean, feel free to play around with it. You're not going to hurt anything setting it down low or setting it up high. Play around, move that setting around. You might find that there's something you like about it. I threw it down the middle. The next one we'll go is PWM frequency. Generally speaking, don't worry about it. Leave that where it is by default. That's what mine is at. It's in the default setting, which was number 4. Unless you know about PWM, which is the frequency communication that the ESC uses with the servo, or not the servo, but the receiver, and it's a communication protocol setting basically. If you aren't real familiar with it and you don't know much about your electronics as far as PWM goes, just leave it in the default setting. It'll work. Okay. Moving on to the final two, Beck voltage. This is that internal BEC that we were talking about earlier. It has 2 settings, which is a really nice feature about the 1080, is that you can adjust the Beck voltage. It has 6 volt and it has 7.4 volt. I have mine set to 7.4, which is option 2. And to be completely honest, it's set above what this servo is actually rated for. I was just noticed on the side of the servo body, it actually has a voltage rating of 4.8 to 6.8 volts. So I am overvolting this servo, which will probably prematurely kill it. But by volting up from 6 volts to 7.4 volts, it is going to generate a little bit more power. So more power is always better. But if you have a 6 volt servo and it's a nice servo, because there are some really nice 6 volt servos, this is where you would set it to 6 volt. It comes at 6 volt by default. Or say you have an 8.4 volt capable servo, then you can come in here and you can bump this to 7.4 volts and get a little bit more power out of it. Higher voltage to the servo is going to give you more power. That's plain and simple. If you give it too much voltage to a servo that isn't rated for it, it'll just burn it up. So that's that. And the last one on here, item 15, is called freewheeling. I'd have to read the instructions for what that does. By default, it is disabled. I have it disabled on mine. It's either enabled or disabled. I don't know exactly what it does, but that's on a trail truck. I mean, feel free to change it, experiment, play with it. But disabled is probably going to be where you want it. All right. So Neil, I just noticed your comment. I don't know how long it's been there. But because I had that screen covered up to look at the manual for the 1080. But on the servo, on that cheap of a servo, I'll always overvolt if it doesn't get, oh, that hasn't been there very long. Yeah, exactly. On a cheap budget servo, overvolt it. I mean, don't go to the moon. Don't send 14 volts to this. It'll probably cook it as soon as you turn it on. But the 7.4, when it's rated for 6.8 and I have the option to run 7.4 or 6, I'm going to run 7.4 all day. A little bit of overvolt is not going to hurt it. And when they're $20, who cares? Run it. I mean, that's not an expensive servo to have to replace. So no reason not to yeah, he just posted it. Yeah, once I realized what it said, I figured you had just posted it. But yeah, so there's the full setup on this. And one thing I am curious about is, or I know someone else is probably a little bit curious, is how can this winch lift powered on a 3S ESC? So let me see if I can figure out a reasonable way to try and show that. I don't have any good way to do that here in my studio space. So I'll do another video on this winch, your basic cheapo. Actually, I think that one's a real RC 4-wheel drive version, but I'm pretty sure I got a China version around here too. And do a power lift on it, see how much those can actually lift. I mean, they have good power and the speed on them is pretty good. I tend to actually go into my controller and ramp the speed down on them just because, or I like to keep the outspeed up And I mean, it's not super fast. I mean, I know there's a lot of comp winches that are a lot faster, but it's decent enough that you can, do something. And then the end speed, uh, I tend to sometimes I'll slow it down a little bit in the controller, take the top end of the end speed out, drop it by from 100% potential down to 80% potential, just to make sure that I have a little bit more control over the winch coming in versus the winch going out. Usually when you're doing winch out, you just want to get it out to be able to hook in. But yeah, that's pretty much a wrap on setting up electronics with a DX5C. Again, your DX5 Rugged is going to be super similar. The control buttons are a little bit different, but the process is identical. Some of your receivers are gonna be different from even your Spectrum receivers. The process is going to be slightly different, especially their fancy new button bind receivers. I may have to get one of those and mess with it and see how much different it is. Ultimately, if you refer to the manual, you can easily find out that information, like on the AVC receiver, where you have to use 2 bind plugs to eliminate the AVC, which I'm really glad that even though I wasn't able to show the truck doing something weird, we could see it in the controller that weird stuff was going on that created issues. And I'm sure that had we left that enabled, it would have created issues out on the trail as well. So just for a trail truck, get rid of AVC if you've got it. Make sure that that's not connected. If you don't have 2 bind plugs, all you have to do is connect. All a bind plug does is it bridges the signal pin and the ground pin on the receiver. So you can make a bind plug out of just about any connector. You can make a bind plug. So there's really no excuse there. It's not a hard thing to do. Or just, stop by a local hobby shop. If you take the truck with you, just borrow one. I'm sure they'll have one, or just get a second one. It's not bad to have spares around. And again, with brush motors, if it's going the wrong way and your controller's set up right, just switch the wires. Disconnect, rotate them around, and it'll go the opposite way. So, yeah, I think that about covers doing this setup. I think that for anyone who makes it to this point in the video, a sneak peek at what's in the box on the shelf behind me is worthwhile, because some of this was probably a little bit on the dry side. And I'm sorry, I try not to make it dry, but setting up electronics just isn't that much fun. But for those who don't know how to do it, it's overwhelmingly intimidating. So I felt that it was, hopefully this video will help somebody out. But now that we have that out of the way, I think I'll do a sneak peek at what's in the box, because you deserve to see it. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, wow. And sneak peek. Is that enough? We happy? You got to see a little something, right? No? Maybe? All right, all right. I know. You want to see more than that. I want to see more than that too. Lance, I am sorry if you are watching. I hope that the one you acquired has arrived, because I got mine. But that's it. That's all you get to see. I'm not taking any of the plastic off. That's going to be for another video. But here it is. This is, yep, it's a hard body for the 1K giveaway build. Super excited for this. However, that video, the next video on this guy, well, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's not going to be until after 4th of July, the weekend after 4th of July. I'm not doing a live stream on 4th of July weekend. And what is this? Let's see, what's the date? The 13th. So in 2 weeks, oh man. Let's see. On the next weekend is going to be a normal Sunday night live stream. 26th and 27th, that weekend, I'm probably going to try and do the live stream on the 26th. I've got family showing up on the 27th, and 4th of July weekend, no live stream. So this will probably be after 4th of July, but maybe if we're lucky and depending on what else I got going on, we might do this on the 26th. It'll depend on how that day goes. There's a comp here locally that day that I'm going to go out to. So if that goes long and hot, then we may just do a really brief live stream recap on how that went. And maybe I'll have some videos queued up to actually play on the live stream. Anyhow, I really appreciate you all watching the video. I hope that the tech on setting up the electronics with the DX5C was helpful, and that someone can learn something, put it to good use. And until the next one, have some fun with some RC, and be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, get the word out, share the link, because we've got to hit 1,000 followers for me to give this away. And trust me, someone is going to be very happy with this truck, and I'm going to be very sad and happy to send it off to somebody because it's going to be awesome. I mean, both scale, hard body, and high quality performance parts are going to be going into this build. So, I mean, be sure, like the channel, get us up to that 1,000 so that we can give this away. Until next time. Oh, wait, there we are.